Ron Kinsley,
Here.
John Righeimer,
Here.
Stacy Hessel, Tom Duffy,
Here.
Dale Schleter.
Let the record indicate we have a forum. Next item is pledge allegiance on the screen, the flag is on the screen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Certification compliance open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Meeting is agenda. The agenda is set. Number 6, public comment. The summer.
Linda Zolmer, resident of the Village of Birchwood, Edgewater property owner. My public comment this morning is to request that as part of the 2024 budget process, the department heads present their budgets to the committees of jurisdiction so that they are able to, first of all, explain the services that they provide, how they're funded from different sources, and where they see this year ending up and the challenges for the coming year, rather than just looking at numbers. And I know in the past that I thought was very helpful when the county used to do that, the department heads made their case for their budgets. And part of this is just attending a few meetings yesterday. At Public Works last night, there was discussion about maybe having a county highway revert back to gravel, which I don't think anybody wants, but there's a money issue. Yet at the morning's Land, Water, and Forestry Committee meeting, $179,000 were awarded to Tuscobia Trail Improvements, which is a state trail. And I had requested that maybe the county consider dropping their MOU with the DNR, because I believe Sawyer is the only one that has taken on the maintenance of the Tuscobia. And then also over $361,000 in other trail grants or construction or maintenance were awarded. And I know the county gets some of that back, but I think in weighing all the different priorities within the county and the big capital projects coming up, having a better picture from the department heads would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody online? Okay. Number 7, approve the minutes of the previous meeting of June 8th. Was there any need for corrections or anything?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Righeimer to approve as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8, supervisor per diem, discussion and possible action. I brought that up. The per diem, as you all know, is $50 per meeting. And if we're going to change any rates or leave them the same, we have to do that prior to the budget process so it can be worked into the budget. Anybody have any comments, thoughts?
I don't drive as far as you do, so I think it's set at a good level. I just wonder if maybe your mileage could be increased or something.
I believe the mileage is set by the state. So. But it's a 52.5.
Yeah.
The mileage to me is immaterial. I mean, yeah, some drive farther than others. That's just the way nature of the beast. Yes.
I think it's fine the way it is. If you were to increase it even to, I see some here, $75. I mean, I guess the thought I've heard from other people, not necessarily on this board, is that, well, you attract higher talent to get more people involved in the board. But, $50 to $75, I don't think makes a big difference. I think we don't do this for the money. We do it to contribute and help the community.
Thank you. Mr. Duffy?
What does Russ County pay?
I don't remember that off the top of my head.
I recall we looked at this a few years ago and there's a variety of different wages. I couldn't tell you any specifics, but some were over $150 and some were pretty close to what we had. But that's been, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, we looked at them.
Yeah, and what I passed out, I did a couple of these, but there was this floated around a couple months ago from another county. They were grabbing everybody's rates, so I pulled that up and to give you an idea of the other counties.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
Yes.
kind of have to read the right column because depending on meeting length, it really starts to vary. And now some are putting in remote meeting, different pay, different compensation if you attend remotely.
Rusk County pays $40 up to 3.5 hours and 55 for 3 to 5. 3 or 5 more. So $40.
And if you're paying city of New Richmond mayor $7,000 or no, alderman. Now we're talking. Tongue in cheek.
When was the last time it was raised?
I don't know when it went to 50. I know when I got on the board 20 years ago, it was at 50. But I dealt with Chris Mayberry a lot. Chris Mayberry always said you gotta keep that so you can bring quality people in. You don't want to have too high or too low. Stacy?
I was just going to say that I think I would rather have any additional money go to the employees so we can retain them. I mean, we're elected officials, $50 is fine because sometimes our meetings are an hour, sometimes they're less. And I think that's a pretty good hourly rate.
Thank you. Mr. Sleater?
Well, as long as I've been on the board, not 20 years, but it'll be 18 in March. I've never been unhappy with the per diems. I mean, like you said, back then, $50 went a little further than it does now. But like Stacy has said, we're elected officials. If you don't want to do the job, don't run. And if you're running it for the money, that's the wrong reason to run. I don't think it's time to change. I'd rather see the money going into employees' salaries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to keep the per diem at $50 for the county board and for the committee meetings.
My second.
So there's a motion by Ms. Essel, second by Mr. Rickheimer to leave it at $50 or have it at $50. And does this go to the full board? I'm not sure. Probably not. We'll just keep it here. When you do the budget, you'll take care of the budget now. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right, so we have motion and a second. Call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, number 9, treasurer's report.
Ms. Abrick just provided this to me. She said she probably wasn't going to be attending the meeting, but it's kind of a recap of, I think, the sales, is it? The delinquent tax sales, correct.
Mr. Chair, if I could offer up one comment, working with the treasurer on in regards to she recaps the properties that were sold. And then we were preparing another sale to go on Wisconsin surplus for properties most recently taken through the in-rem process. That's been postponed. And looking through the list, we did get a contact from a tribal member that has a property that was taken through delinquent taxes. That may likely be impacted by the appeals court decision. So we've sent the list out to LCO and asked them to look at all the names of the properties to verify if any of those are tribal members before we proceed with the sale, rather than complicate things further.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the report that JD put together? Hearing none, will move forward. Finance Department report, sales tax.
So right now, we're actually at that halfway point for sales tax. They're running kind of fast. It looks funny because we actually only get about a third of that so far, but that's big months. Sales tax on. So while the projection is still strong, we've been pretty consistent. Keep in mind that the bulk of our sales tax.
Good explanation. Any questions? Let's move to the budget.
All right, moving on to the budget. Again, we are at the halfway point now. So we can really start seeing some trends. We're in overall really good shape. Some of the revenues that we're lagging have caught up. We still are a little behind on some grant revenues, especially on the Health and Human Service side, which is not uncommon. We're very grant heavy in that department, and those always lag. That was really the only thing I was going to point out that's out of whack at all. Obviously, our interest income is high, which is good. Otherwise, all the expenses were looking very good. HHS is running a little deficit now. It's not uncommon for this time of year. It's a little bit more than it's been, but the revenues are a little more behind than they were last year. So that's kind of why that is. Highway department is running a little profit right now. They get a lot of grant money back from the state as well. So everything is lagging a little bit there, but the expenses are good. Even with the harsh winter, overall, we're in good shape.
Can I stop you for a moment?
Sure.
Let the committee know that at Public Works, we've gotten complaints about Highway S. And I myself have not traveled Highway S. I know Andy, did you travel? It's in really bad shape. Last night, the highway commissioner brought some information in for us. And I don't know if I got the numbers exact because I didn't write them down last night, but for gravel, it was going to be around 200,000 to gravel. It's 3.14 miles.
3.14 miles. The $175,000 number was some gravel, but cold patch.
Of the patch it. And he had a price for gravel in the whole road, which we probably really don't want to do, or putting an overlay over the whole road. And that was going to be 300 something. Which is all money that we don't have. They could potentially they could juggle some numbers and come up close to that. So I just want the committee to be aware for some of the finance money could end up going. Okay.
John and Brad are coming over to want to Mike and I to see if we can squeeze anything out for this year to get it done. So a couple of roads took a pretty good beating over the winter. They're really rough shape. The balancing act is we can shift any money to the construction area. And our maintenance funds, we are pretty tight as well because of. So the commissioner shared last night, we have enough money for one storm the rest of this.
So, thank you. I just wanted to bring the committee abreast of that.
All right, next is CIP. Very little activity. did some work on the dam in Winter, and we have a MOU with Winter where they reimburse us half of the cost back, so that's reflected in there as well. So the net was just over 8,000 for that. Any questions on that? Court fines and collections, I have not been able to pull data together for that yet. That's something I can't just run a report for. I have to rely on some other people, and everybody's busy, so I'll continue to work on that and hopefully get something for the next meeting.
Court fines and court fines and what, and
Collections,
collections.
kind of trying to figure out the percentage we're getting.
Is that something we can even do anything about? If we say, whoa, we're not getting enough money for this, we can't raise them, can we? They're set by law or by the judge.
Those are set, yes. I think the question was what percentage we're collecting of what we're billing out, not the overall amount.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I believe that was Mr. Schumann's question. Any questions on that? All right, moving on to the resolution in front of us today. This would be to award the sale and issue of that $4 million in debt. The sale is scheduled for next Thursday. So this is kind of a preliminary approval from the finance committee. The board as a whole would take it up at next week's meeting with the actual results from the bid process.
We'll refresh our memory of this $4,000 is for, excuse me. Is that what I said? I said $1 million.
This is the remaining portion of the second courthouse and remodeling of the first. It's the 2023 CIP, which was 1.367 million. 2024 CIP, which is going to be 1.5 million. And then there was a little bit left, about 45,000 that we were asking for contingency for the remodeling of this original courthouse. And the repayment of the $320,000 property we bought in December of last year.
I'll make a motion to bring this resolution to the full board.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Cecil, second by Mr. Righeimer to approve and pass on to the full board. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When do the people requesting money from the budget, when do those have to be in, and how are those? Are they sent out? Can you remind me of that process?
Yep, I sent that out. They're due at the end of this month. I've actually got most of them back already. There's a couple of the bigger ones that I'm waiting for, and let's go from there. So far, they're pretty much in line with what we've seen in the past. Either exactly the same or a small increase request. Mhm. All right, moving on to investments. Another strong month with our interest earnings, almost 90,000 this month, last month. Well, with May this is. The LifeQuest one in red, that is last month's balance, because at the time of producing this, we still didn't have that one. That comes very late. And we don't really have control over that. It's actually a bank account that LifeQuest holds, and then they send us the money from that. But the rates are almost at 5%. They continue to go up just a little bit each month. So we're really taking advantage of that right now. Actually, I'm paced to hit almost $1 million in interest earnings this year, which would be wonderful. If it keeps up. I guess, well, it comes later, but we do have an informal proposal of how to spend down some of the opioid money. So that'll be coming soon. I think we've gotten 3 payments on that.
And then can you describe what we can use the interest on this? And does it go into the general fund?
It goes to wherever the money is sitting that's producing it. So most of it is general fund. Some of it is the interest on the investments from the construction as well. So that stays there.
That's what I was going to ask. Can we use that to pay down our debt? That's what we can use it for, correct?
You can use it for contingency.
Okay.
So
I think the general public, if they see that we have $1 million in interest, then they're gonna increase what they request on the budget. Because anytime you have like a seemingly surplus, they're gonna ask for more money. So I just want to be firm on what we can and can't spend that money on.
Good point.
Did you ask if we could use the interest to pay down our debt?
Yeah.
Some that we could, some that we can't, because you can't, you're in front of the notes, so you pay on the step. And so you can't go in and buy down. Because the buyer of the note is expecting the rate of return that is, they buy the note.
I would appreciate if we just be transparent, but make sure it's firm on so that they are not requesting. I saw that on the state level that people request millions when they think that you have that, but they don't realize you can't spend it on certain things.
mhm. Well, I wouldn't necessarily budget $1 million for next year either, because you don't know what's going to happen.
We know that. We're in this committee, but the general public.
Yeah, understood. Yep. Any other questions on investments? All right, moving on to ambulance billing. Again, we're comparing from 19 through 23, and I'm doing a rolling 12 months now, so it's not year to year anymore. And I mentioned last month that we have exceeded a year with Life Touch now, so it will start to water down kind of that drastic change we saw, because we're going to start getting more months of Life Touch in that previous 12-month cycle. Looking at the aging report again, you can see the grand total is up a little bit from last month, 30,000. That doesn't concern me, because when you look at the current and the 31 to 60 days, those are both way up. So again, when I look at this, I'm looking at what percentage is current and what is really out there lagging that we are struggling to collect. So the percentage of current went up again to almost a third. And even the 31 to 60 went up quite a bit from last month too. So those are encouraging numbers for me. Next
Question.
slide.
I got a
Oh,
question.
go ahead.
At one point, we were trying to collect some money from tribal members, and they had some kind of program that they could pay X amount of dollars. I don't know what the X amount was. Do we know if they are paying anything for tribal members?
I don't know that.
That has not been a discussion I had since I've been here.
Okay,
But we're not getting, like, plus the billing company can set up payment plans with the payers. But we're not getting a something for that.
We're not seeing a lot come in on the debt prior to Life Touch. I do know that. So if that was something that was set up before that, we're not seeing a lot of that come in.
Thank you.
The average calls per month, again, now that we're kind of transitioning here, 2023 and 2021, 22 are starting to look a little more similar. Still a big drop in calls from where we were a couple years ago. But, and that I don't know why it is. I'm just getting fewer calls. But this isn't good information. This isn't what I put a lot of weight in. And, you know, I'm a finance guy. I'm looking more at the dollars of it. And the next slide shows what we're billing per month. So our billing is up even though our number of calls are still down. And now we're actually getting to have a pretty good gap between last year and this year. And as I've mentioned before, some of that is due to raising the fees a little bit, but some of that's been reflected in last year's stuff now too. The average collected per month, this is where I really start looking at the numbers, and you know, we're up 33% from the previous 12 months, so that's good.
So we're collecting, what was the billing for the same period? Where's the difference, the delta?
Actually, a couple slides from now, you can see that better, where, you know, what it looks like. But I think the billings are up 23,000 a month, but revenue's up 25. So
We're collecting more than billing.
the increment, we're collecting more than we're billing, yeah. The next one is the percent collected per month. This is where you see some of that reflected, where we were down to 32% the last 12 months, and now we're up to almost 39. And we're actually, this is the best we've been in the 4-year period. So
Refresh my memory, we're anticipating you would never be 100%. So we're at
correct.
that percentage now.
Uh,
What's the goal?
Andy's mentioned a common threshold is 50%. I think it'd be tough for Sawyer County in our demographic to get to that point, because we're pretty heavy on Medicaid, Medicare, and that rate pays so much lower that we're always going to be affected by that. Would you agree, Andy?
Perhaps we can get more shared revenue to help cover some of this.
Perhaps, yeah. No, we're grateful for that. Next slide then. Here's where you can kind of see that gap. So the column on the chart on the left is what we're billing per call. So it's not per month, but it's per call. And then the one on the right is what we're collecting per call. The variations aren't that much, but you can see where the height difference from the middle brown one to the light green on the left, the amount collected and the amount billed, the gap is different. And that's where, you know, we just weren't doing as good a job collecting on the billing. And now the percentage is back up. So we're strong again. And then the final slide is just looking at how we're doing with the ambulance as a whole. And right now we're showing almost a $250,000 profit. And we're probably not going to hit that. Last year, I think we were within $2,500 of a break even. So while we're not hitting what we're budgeting for service revenue, our expenses have been under too, so it's kind of washing out.
Good explanation.
I think we're going in the right direction. When I first got on the board 3 years ago, it was like, what is EMS? What is the billing? And it was so defunct that this is really great to see the positive movement.
Letter B, my friend.
Are you taking that one, Andy?
So this is a sharing discussion that happened in public safety. A discussion that happened in public safety last week. So as part of the budget process and as part of our contracts with the the Washburn County towns that we contract with or contract with us for ambulance service, July is when we would initiate a discussion with them to discuss next year's contract and rates. So this is a summary document that shows that currently we contract with the towns of Stone Lake and Bass Lake for the entire township. And the contract with the town of Birchwood is for the north half of their township. The contracts have been in place, I believe, since 2016. The last rate adjustment occurred in 21. Current contract rates are based off of a $40 per capita amount. So the town of Stone Lake is at $19,880. They were adjusted to $40 per capita in 21. They have not changed since then. So town of Stone Lake is $19,880. Bass Lake is $20,600, and Birchwood is $9,600, and that's half of their population. Our cost to operate the ambulance service has continued to increase over the years. I believe when the rates were increased in 21 to the $40 per capita, it was actually costing us closer to 60, but they were only being charged, I think $29 per capita at that time. So there was like a small step up, but not to the full amount that it was really equivalent to in Sawyer County. So last year's ambulance service in 22, based on actual cost divided by the population served, was a $63 per capita cost of the service per individual. On 23, based on the budget, it's $80 per capita because we did have a healthy increase because of the increase in wages we provided to the paramedics and EMTs. The per capita rate has been used since the contracts were in place. In part, I believe, because that's how other ambulance services in the area charge. If you want to contract with them, is based on per capita. And within Sawyer County, it's not calculated on per capita basis. It's assessed to the property owners based on the equalized value of your property and the cost of operating the ambulance service. The 1.5 million is assessed on equalized value. So at the bottom, when we discussed this in public safety, we looked at the current rate. If we just left the rate at the $40 per capita based on current population, what the charges to the towns would be, and then the $60, $80, and then the equalized value based on the value of their towns if we switch to that. And that gets the decision out of public safety was to go to the towns with the $80 per capita rate. And so John Fremmel and I have been to the town of Birchwood and town of Bass Lake so far, and then we have meetings coming up with next month with town of Stone Lake. We've presented the information, told them what our request is for 24. A lot of good questions. It's not, we didn't go there expecting them to make a decision right away. Pretty transparent conversation because I think all the cards are on the table. We know town of Birchwood, the Four Corners Ambulance Service is just down the road, and the North Memorial has a contract with the towns to the west of these townships. So they have other options that I think they'll explore. Most of them did comment though that the reason they're with Sawyer County initially was because we offer a paramedic level service. So they realize that it's a little bit higher level of acuity that can be accomplished. The calls, we generally don't have a lot of calls in these towns. We're just, there's not a good record keeping or tracking for out of county calls at this point. They just show up as out of county calls, but at most, on average, it's 1 call a month per town is what we're doing. There's just not that many calls, and generally what we're hearing or what John and looking at the call sheets or run sheets is we don't have a lot of calls in those towns, but when we do have a call, it's usually a fairly serious incident. So there's a higher level of care needed. So we'll go to the next town and make the presentation. I anticipate there'll be some back and forth on this, just going from 40 to 80 is probably a shock to their budgets as it would be to ours if we had that same situation. So at some point, we'll have to make a decision on if we're gonna hold to the 80 or if we'll go to something different than that, or how we want to handle it. From a, like, I think there's like a policy or politics type consideration for the board to make is, you know, do you want to charge the towns outside of the county on the equivalent basis? And the perception of how that looks, you know, right now we're charging less. If you looked at it strictly on a per capita, from a business argument though, any revenue we get from those towns offsets the amount of levy we apply to Sawyer County taxpayers. It doesn't, serving those towns really doesn't affect our expense side. You know, those amount of calls, we're not going, if we lose them, or they say we're going to contract with somebody else, we're not going to lay people off or downsize the service. So that's kind of the balancing act you'll have to consider. But I expect we'll be back in August with, this is what we're hearing, or this is what we're getting back from the towns, and here are your options.
What's their alternative? I mean, somebody get negotiations coming up, but what's their alternative to go to Washburn County, or that's what they shop it to?
Yeah, depending on the town of Birchwood, definitely there's the Four Corners ambulance service, which runs out of like essentially the village and serves towns there, 4 towns that make up the Four Corners. And then North Memorial has an ambulance base. I believe it's in Spooner now. It used to be south of Spooner, but I think it's right in Spooner. They serve Stinnett, and they serve the other towns in Washburn County, I think, except for these. They don't run, they're not a paramedic level service. I think they're an advanced level. They do have some paramedics, but they don't have enough to run a fully licensed paramedic level service. So those are the other options. Those are the 2 likely options that these 3 towns would have. Response time, I think part of the reason that they've been with Sawyer County I think they've been with Sawyer County longer than 2016, if I understand the history. There just wasn't any contracts in place. But our response time is quicker, and now our level of care is higher.
Just so I got confirming, sounds like your latter option, although they're being charged less, it's better, in essence, better for us because it's great.
That's one way of phrasing it, yes. That's the way I would look at it.
It's on computing.
Right.
Thank you.
One separate item I wanted to mention, because I think the question actually came out of this committee, was a breakdown of calls by towns within Sawyer County. And so if you refer to the public safety packet, the ambulance director did include that in his report last week. So I can put up on the screen you want, or if you just want to look at it, he does break it down by the city, the town, each township in the county, as well as the out of county calls.
Anybody got any questions regarding any of this? Financial fund update, ARPA funds?
There's really no update. We have all the money. We are working through, we've got ARPA agreements coming in. The auditors recommended we have some type of contract with each of the recipients, so we're getting those back. And then we've got no current requests for disbursements, but the broadband projects are all being worked on, so we'll expect to receive disbursements for those anytime now.
When did the auditors go through the stuff, do they charge? Like now, since we've been getting ARPA funds for a few years, do they charge extra for dealing with ARPA funds? Do we know?
The auditors?
Special funds, like this is
Yep.
special fund, opioid fund. Do the auditors charge extra for these extra funds?
I don't think they do for these. Like if we set up a whole new. like, Fund with a lot of activity, possibly. But I think this is just part of the regular audit.
From an audit standpoint, prior to us, so I think Tom and Mike had signed a contract with CLA to advise on the ARPA funds,
Okay,
but we haven't had to use CLA for any advisement in the last year. But there was a separate contract with separate fees, but we have not had incurred any of those fees in this last year.
well, as they bring the information in, they start billing us, please watch for that, because for the town of Radisson, we use Clifton Larson also. And we did a boat landing and they charged us an extra $1,800 for that boat landing.
We
So
will,
just be aware and
Sure.
watch for that.
the other funds, opioid funds, we're receiving annual disbursements, so we've got all of last year's and we've actually got a couple of years ahead for one of the settlements. So we're getting those in. Like Mike mentioned, there's a tentative budget that's been put together, but actually it's not complete is basically the short story. I looked at it with Mike. I had some feedback that we need to include a few other things in there before we present it to the board. But we do have something put together. And then the local area consistency fund dollars are just sitting in the bank account right now. We have not received the disbursement for this year yet. We won't receive that. Well, we weren't supposed to receive it till the start of the federal fiscal year. So that will be this fall sometime.
So Public Works gets that funding, correct? It's not run through I'm not Public Works, Public Health.
Public health is taking the lead on putting together the budget. The budget will come to the board. Well, through the CJCC committee is where it was assigned. I don't know, a while, like prior to me, that's when we started working on it. So they've seen the draft report and the draft budget, but it'll go back through them next month and then come to the board for approval. So some of the dollars to be used will be used by public health, and then some by law enforcement. So there's different components to the budget. Who's actually going to get the money is not just public health.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about the Public Works confusion.
Future agenda items. Wasn't a part of it. How about letter C? Is there anything you want to add about that? I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, like the money's in the account. We get the second and final disbursements later this year. At this point, we've just kind of left that alone since we're still working through the ARPA and opioid dollars. There's no, it is more than likely one-time funding, but there is no restriction on it either. Can be treated as general revenue.
Thank you. Correspondence. I had a question to comment from Venus Finance, and I know that you've been putting together for an assistant for the new judge. But here's my comment, Andy, is there was the constant bounce of 1.6 and 1.8 judges. So now they're bringing the second judge on August 1st. And I know you put a lot of work into putting together so we can hire an assistant to do the scheduling for them. But I also know that we have a lot of employees that are doing probably 1.5 or maybe 2, and they don't get much help with different things. Why can't this judge do their own planning and scheduling of it? Because we're just at 1.8, that's not 2. You follow what I'm asking?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good answer.
I know it's not going to happen, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so I didn't put it on this agenda, it's on the admin. The proposal we put forward is to add the second judicial assistant, but we're adding additional duties to the position for both judicial assistants to fill out full-time jobs. as far as the judge doing their own scheduling or, that's,
I know. Makes me mad inside. Makes me mad that we have other employees that are doing just as much work as these judges were. And yet they didn't get any extra help, and now we get help here. And how much is the state gonna help? I mean, you were nice enough to forward them numbers that they
Yep.
forwarded this to us, but that doesn't cover everything.
no,
My 2 cents.
yeah, we, at least. And I'll
Mr.
just,
Leader?
if you're at admin, you'll see it, or if you're at public safety. So we are getting additional state aid. It's a net halftime position that we're proposing, a net halftime increase to start with, which will be, we're expecting to be cost neutral because of the additional funding, but there is a request for next year to have a full-time position in the clerk of court's office, which would take us up more, that we'd have to put more levy into to that area. But we'll deal with that with the 24 budget is what we're proposing.
Mr. Leader?
Yeah, back to the what position were we just talking about? The judge's assistant.
Just assistant.
Who makes who makes the actual decision on whether there is or isn't a full-time assistant?
I believe the county board does.
County board does based on, you authorize the position and you have to fund the position. The decision on how it's filled or who the person is a judicial appointment. But
No, but who makes the final decision on, do we need that second,
the county board,
the county board?
yep.
Okay, and then you said something about what they're paid, or the state says what they're paid.
We set the pay, they're our employees, so it's on the county payroll, county pay grid. The state funds, the state provides us state court aid, which is based on the number of courtrooms you have, number of branches you have. So right now we get 52,750 or thereabouts. So starting August 1st, we will get, it's a different formula when you have more than one courtroom, but they're saying to project double that amount. And so this year we'll get a pro rata amount, and then next year we'll get a full allocation for 2 courtrooms.
Okay, but that, we still have to kick in quite a bit of money to keep the
Yes,
court
because
system running.
that money is not just, I mean, it offsets your operating
Some
court
yeah.
costs. So it's clerk of court staff is in that budget, judicial assistants, witness fees, appointed attorney fees. There's a couple other court expenses. That's all in that.
Okay, you said you're going to add additional duties to both of these people. Where are those? So are you creating additional duties, or are you
Nope.
just
We're taking
taking
we're
duties
proposing,
away from somebody else?
well, we have a vacancy, which is why it came up a little quicker than I initially projected. It's because we had our registered probate juvenile clerk took a different position within the county. They're moving into youth justice in the CPS area and human services. So that position's open. That's another court support position. So rather than fill that job, we're splitting it and we're assigning the juvenile clerk duties because they would normally do the clerking duties for the judge. Instead, that responsibility would be part of the judicial assistant's job for each judge. And then the registered probate duties will be assigned to the clerk of court's office, and we'd add a halftime position there. So mentally, if you want to just think that we're shifting the registered probate juvenile clerk job, that's becoming a judicial assistant. And we're adding, that's for the second judge. And then we're adding a net halftime position, a new position in the clerk of courts for the registered probate duties being assigned there.
Okay, so when all of that is put together, is this budget neutral, or is it?
For the rest of 23, we're projecting no increase in the budget because the additional state aid for the court will cover the halftime position.
And for 24,
If we stick with that for 24, I would project the same thing,
same thing.
but as part of the budget process, we already have a position request that we'll have to decide on in the clerk of court's office for a full-time position. And if we go to a full-time position, then it will cost us more levy dollars to support the court.
Okay, thank you.
Having that position is still cheaper than housing the inmates. So if we can funnel people through the court system faster with the second judge, then that's ideal because that'll save us money on the other end, correct?
It will. Already our inmate numbers are down. I mean, we'd have to go down a lot in inmates in order to reduce staffing in the jail. So, because whether we have 100 inmates or we have 70, it's still the same staffing. We'd have to get down a lot more actually with the way the jail is designed to be able to reduce the staffing numbers in the jail. I mean, you save money on meal costs and some of those things, but any real savings, we'd have to really reduce our jail population. But it could reduce having more cases moving through in a more timely manner should reduce other costs. Like there should be less scheduling hearings and just there should be less activity within the court long term. The only thing when I say that we're net neutral based on the court budget is right now we don't know what the effect of a second courtroom will be on the judicial process. Like we don't know that cases now that are being settled because it's so long to get to a trial, will they be less likely to settle and then we'll have more trials or more jury trials and more court costs? We don't know. We just don't know that yet. Because really there shouldn't be any more, in theory, there should be no more crime and no more charges and cases with the second courtroom. It should be quicker, but that's why I'm saying that the state aid, the other, we know the staffing costs, the other court expenses of having cases and appointing attorneys and bringing witnesses in theory, that shouldn't change. But until we're operating, I mean, there's not a good, other counties that have added this additional courtrooms are adding the new branches were all just authorized in the last couple of years. So there's not historical data from other counties even to look at to see what impact adding courtrooms has had on their overall budget.
But all these things we're documenting, so then we can be an example. If another county wants to do it, we can say, hey, look at these situations.
Yeah.
Because I think it would have been nice if we would have had that same comparable to different counties. We were just trying to do what was best for this county, but it would have been nice to know all of these hidden costs up front. Thank you.
What's that?
At one point, there was a question on whether, but the second judge that Judge Yackel, does he go on the circuit rotation now too? So will he be removed out of this building?
Yes, he'll be on the road a fair amount. He's already been, this is back a month or two ago, whenever we started talking about this, district court told me that he, and essentially him and his judicial assistant had already been assigned 30 cases outside the county. Prior to that, they had none because they were overloaded here. But now they'll be doing more substitute judging or moving out into other counties to provide assistance, just like we have judges coming in here for cases that there's a conflict on or that there needs to be a substitution for.
I mean, so both judges are rotating, right?
Yes.
And because there's not 2.0 need for them. Okay.
Yep.
And then when they're in another county, those costs are shared, I guess.
The state pays for the state pays the judges, but it still will take, I mean, we'll be paying our judicial assistant to assist the judge on the logistics of those other counties. Like, our JA doesn't go with them, but they're scheduling they're responsible to schedule the rooms, line up the attorneys and all the logistics that go with that judge working in another county.
Right.
Has the judge taken has he gone on, lack of better terms, on the road already?
No, I mean, he's been assigned the cases, my understanding, but the cases don't have hearings until after the new judge here is in place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we have? Yes.
It was on. Okay. When we had to have other judges come in. That was additional financial burden to Sawyer County, right?
No, well, no additional, not the cost of the judge. The judge is paid by the state, so there was no, I mean, we incur the other costs of the court cases. So if there are attorney fees or other costs of running, like the cost of the jurors, that's still ours, but we don't pay any extra because another judge had to come here and be the substitute judge on a case in Sawyer County. Because it's still a Sawyer County case. It's just that the judge from another county is filling that role and they're being paid by the state.
100% by the state?
Yes, the judges are.
Okay, thank you.
You have anything else? Good discussion. Thank you for your fine work. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Pardon?
No report.
The companies that we'd already made grants to, we're working with them on getting the ARPA agreements in place and getting updates on their projects, because we've dispersed a couple earlier this year, but we'll have more disbursements when those projects start completing this fall. And the next thing that will be happening towards the end of the year is what they're saying is the BEAD funding, BEAD, will be coming available for companies to apply for. That's why there's this survey going around, because they're trying to assess where there are still gaps in service or where there's still poor service, so they can target the BEAD money to those areas. Trying to think of anything else. There's the regional BEAD group, but I've not had any updates for that. Ed Peters serves on that for us. And there was part of the ARPA agreements, they're giving us their projects as they complete them. Still, the best map is the federal map is the most current. There's a map that you can zero right into an address through the FCC, and that's the one that we're turning to people towards. But we'll be able to overlay our data from the companies onto the county map, but it's going to be in blocks. We're not going to have they're not giving us specific addresses. They're giving us like blocks, like we've done this area. This area is under not being served, or this area we have a plan to do in the next year. Yeah, there was just a round of state funding last month that was awarded, and BevCom got a grant for the southern portion between Radisson and Exland, and Novato got another grant. But the BEAD funding is federal dollars that are coming to the state for disbursement, and that's the state's doing all this planning to decide how they're going to disperse it and hit the areas most in need. In the BEAD funding, the last time I heard is at the end of 23 is when they'll make those monies available into this year.
One question, going back to the court and so forth, I have heard that 80% of the jail population at times can be native. I have heard that 87% of the fentanyl issues are native. Does the LCO share? Is there a way to get them to share in the cost of that burden, or is that just it is what it is?
Today, I'm going to tell you it is what it is. I mean, they do have their own wellness centers and Beziki, that things to help assist those people. And part of the planning for the opioid money it does involve them, but as far as their sharing in cost or how we work that, there's.
Would that be something that has to be brought up with state legislators or is that a federal issue? What is that? I mean, I'm assuming if I'm the LCO, I don't want to share in it if I don't have to, but who would we even go to as citizens? State legislator, governor,
Yeah,
congressman?
it's more federal than it
So it'll
is
be
state.
congressman. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not an easy issue because it's a federal issue, but from a state standpoint, it's just like our human services, they have some of their human services providers out there. But if a tribal member that lives within the reservation boundaries lives within Sawyer County as well, so if they come to us, we have to serve them. We can't say go there first.
So I understand. And I hope I want everybody to be served. I mean, but to me, it's like, it would be like if Washburn County or Russ County was overwhelming our system, but they weren't contributing to the solution financially. That's,
Right.
I know there's a lot to it, but
Yeah, and I would just kind of anecdotally, this week, we've had a couple conversations because there has been and when I say conversations, kind of internal here, like, okay, what's happening? Because there's been a sharp uptick in overdoses in the last few weeks. The sheriff has shared that with us to the extent that, and we haven't been able to go verify this, but like there was a situation that required an ambulance, but the ambulance wasn't available because it was tending to an overdose. So now we're starting to sacrifice services because of the overdose issue. And we need to generate a conversation locally because of the things you mentioned about the statistics on, how do we address this? It's not a us, them, it's a we problem. And how do we?
oh, I totally agree. If you could update us on that, I think if it can be shared, that would be great.
Sure.
Does the tribe share some of the costs of transport for the natives?
I don't know if I can speak to that one for sure. I don't know. I mean, we have they have their own victim advocate in persons that are located here in the courthouse, but as far as the defense of them, I'm not sure how that's. I don't know. I don't know enough to know if they have like their own program that they'll provide defense. You're talking about like I'm trying to think of the word here. Hang on. When you're assigned a public defender, I don't know if they fund their own public defender program for their members. I just don't know that.
Excuse me, good discussion, good questions. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.